Welcome to Macon Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College. Today is February 2nd, 2013, and I'm here today with Gladys Grainger, class of 1976. Gladys, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised, and went to high school?
Actually, I was born right here in the area. I was raised here in Ashland, and I attended and graduated from Patrick Henry High School. And I only applied to 3 schools. I was very active in high school, both in the academic and social clubs and organizations. And what led me to accept interest here at Randolph-Macon is, at the time, Randolph-Macon was predominantly a male school, private school, and predominantly white. And I wanted, and I'm just going to be frank, I wanted to go to a school that groomed the white male population, because at that time, that's who ran this country. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to learn what the white men learned. Mm-hmm. That's why I came here. And it's interesting because once I got here, I was not only a minority in race, but I was a minority in gender. Mm-hmm. And that was very interesting to me, because in all the years I was here, I never felt uncomfortable. It was not uncommon to be in a classroom where it was all male, even the teachers. Mm-hmm. And one day I found myself looking around in the classroom, and I noticed, I said, oh my gosh, I'm the only female in this class, mm-hmm. and the only black person in this class. Mm-hmm. Never felt uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But that was because of the environment Randolph-Macon forged. Mm-hmm. I never felt uncomfortable or felt that I was intruding or out of place. Mm-hmm. I was there to learn, and that's exactly what I did. But the environment made it so that I was able to ask whatever questions I wanted to ask, to say whatever I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. So for that, I'm thankful. Mm-hmm. But what I realized is, given my background from Ashland, small town, and the people were all the same, basically. There was really no diversity for me to really speak of until I came to Randolph-Macon, because here I interacted with students from all over the country, all over the world, actually. Mm-hmm. I was very close to one gentleman. He was from Iran, Nader Artabadi, and we were both English majors. And I learned so much about his culture and how women were treated in his country back then. And, of course, a lot of that has really not changed when you look at what's going on in that part of the world. But that's what I'm most thankful for, because I was able to interact with people from all over the world, and that gave me a lot of insight as far as diversity and why it's so important to be able to interact with people from all walks of life. I was, from a very poor background. Let's just be honest. And the only reason I knew I would have the opportunity to go to school is to make the grades and get a scholarship. So I was able to work toward getting that full scholarship, academic scholarship, that enabled me to become educated. I'm the first college graduate in my family, and that's something I'm very proud of. My son, he's now in law school in Durham. So it's enabled me to move in circles that I probably would not have had the opportunity to do. Randolph-Macon afforded me that opportunity to be a success in life, because that's what all people want. They
Right.
want to be happy and they want to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was able to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a wonderful testimony. Well, since you were from Ashland, did you live on campus when you
Yes, I
attended
did.
it? You did.
That was one of the uh, requirements. I said I have to live on campus
Yes.
because I grew up about a mile away,
Yes.
and actually 2 miles, right up off of number 1,
Uh-huh.
Jamestown Road.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, my mother didn't drive. She was just too nervous, and she and my father were divorced. So she depended on me to drive her to
Mm-hmm.
where she needed to go. That was really funny because my younger sister and younger brother, they at the time, didn't drive. So I was the one, and so it was convenient for me to be able to leave and take her to wherever she needed to go. So I kept the car, the family car, on
Yes.
campus,
Uh-huh.
so I would be accessible to
Uh-huh.
her and
Mm-hmm.
do what she needed to do. Well, when I was about to graduate, I said, Mama, now I don't know where I'm going,
Right.
where from here. So you've got to learn to drive. And she was in her mid 40s, and she was so nervous. So I would take her out and teach her how to drive, and she was still very nervous. She took the test 3 times and failed 3 times. And the instructor said, the tester, he said, Miss Patterson, you almost got it this time. I tell you just need a little bit more practice. And he said, I tell you what, you come back in a week and apply for your chauffeur's license. That was the key, because you could only try 3 times for the operator's license.
Oh.
And he said, try for your chauffeur's, and then you can transfer it over after a year. That's how she got her license.
Oh my goodness! So she had a hard time driving, but she became a chauffeur.
Well, all she did was drive around Ashland.
Yes.
Grocery store, bank, whatever. And so it was enough for her.
Yes.
So that allowed me to move on with what I wanted to do.
Yes.
So I was able to, I thought about going to graduate school, but at the time, that was not what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I got a job at Mutual of New York Insurance Company, which was downtown, right in the heart of the corporate America with the white men.
But you were comfortable in that environment.
Yes,
now.
I was very comfortable. And, of course, I thrived in that environment.
Yes.
I worked mainly with white males who sold life insurance,
Yes.
disability income insurance. And originally, I applied for that position. And I didn't feel comfortable going out and marketing
Sales.
because I didn't really have a base. You have to have a base and a network. And I really didn't. So I said, well, is there something I can do to learn the business? And that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so in turn, I worked myself up to the office manager, the administrative manager, and the company was changing. So we had the main office in Richmond. We had an office in Norfolk, and we had an office in Roanoke. So eventually I became the administrative manager for the whole operation for Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So, and part of that was because of the relationship building and
Yes.
getting along and working with people. And one of the first people I worked with was Godfrey Smith, who was a graduate of Randolph-Macon. And we became very close. He was a $1 million roundtable producer for Mutual of New York for years. And, of course, I believe some of his children attended this school, too. I mean, because that's what I found out. And coming here, most of the people who attend Randolph-Macon, their grandfathers and people, it's a family legacy, very steeped in that family tradition. You go to Randolph-Macon, so, your grandfather went, your father went, and so on. And that's how Godfrey was. I encouraged my son to apply here.
Mm-hmm.
He applied here. He got accepted. He also applied to Hampton-Sydney and got accepted. He decided not to go to either. He went to the University of Illinois. 38,000 students, which
so
really
different.
upset me because he, first of all, chose to go halfway across the country rather than coming here or going to Hampton-Sydney, two very good schools. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
We're not here to talk about him. But I wanted to kind of continue the legacy, but he decided not to come here.
Well, so you were an Ashland girl, and you came and moved in on campus, and now you were, remind me, you were the second class of women that came, that
Right.
graduated. So that fall, you were the second fall where women were coming on campus. So tell me about where you lived and your roommate and what it was like, because women were still very new.
Oh, yes. Well, there were 50 women in the first class, and we all lived in Murray Branch. The majority of the girls lived in Murray Branch, the first 50. And I also lived in Murray Branch on the third floor. My roommate was from Norfolk. She did not graduate. She left probably after the second year for personal reasons. We were very, we had some things in common, but she was really not very close. I was not very close with her. I actually was very friendly with Yvonne Brandon, who's we still stay in contact because she's in Richmond. She's the City of Richmond superintendent for public schools, and so we still interact quite a bit. She came up from Alabama, and we had a lot of the same classes. And she had never lived in this area before. She moved from Birmingham, and we had actually 5 black females on the campus at that time. Charlotte Beeman and Glinda Dickerson were from that first class. And then Yvonne and I and Barbara were from the class of 76. There were a total of 12 females and males on the campus.
Wow.
In 76 out of the 800 plus students. And most of the males were from the Richmond area. There was a Floyd Claiborne, who was a couple of years ahead of us. Fletcher Johnson, Jerome Ross, Michael Love, Reginald Barley, who went on to law school, and I think he was on the board, and maybe still on the board here. I'm not sure.
Board of Associates.
And who else? I'm trying to remember everyone, but we all had dinner. We all ate dinner together. We had our own special place where we had dinner together. Every day at 5:30, we all convened and so we would interact with each other based on, different things that we had in common. And basically, we still had other friends outside of the group, but that was our time together. And we found it was our time to interact about our experiences at school and different things that went on. And it was fun time for us. So I think we needed that, period, because we were a minority. And everyone would look over at the cafeteria, and there we were. And
did you always sit at the same table? I'm just curious.
Same table.
And
we all sat together.
Yeah.
And laughed and joked and sang songs, whatever. We had this game we would play. we would guess who the artist was. And they were all the music, the black music at the time. Because if you will recall, you know, in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of the black artists were crossing over into the mainstream. And so music was a big part of the integration process.
Yes.
Because when growing up in Ashland, we went to John M. Gandy, and it was segregated until the 9th grade. And then we were forced to go to Patrick Henry. And we weren't happy about that, because I will tell you, we knew education was the key to become successful. You had to have that opportunity, even at John M. Gandy. And so our teachers, we would have lectures where they would talk about the importance of education and how that was the way for you to assimilate into the white world, so to speak. After integration, we didn't get that anymore. But I never forgot what the teachers, my teachers, had communicated to me, and why it was so important to get good grades, why it was so important to be accepted and learn what they learn. And I guess that's where I got that notion that I want to go to this school, because this is where I'm going to learn what they learn, so I can be successful. And I think integration, in a sense, kind of hindered a lot of the black students, the minorities, because they no longer got that message. A lot of them in the family life don't get that message because their parents aren't educated. As I said, I was the first college graduate. They don't get that information unless they're in an environment. I'm not saying they don't, but it's less.
Right.
Even today.
Right.
I think that's part of the problem.
And I have heard people say that prior to integration, the black schools were a very supportive environment. That, you know, it was a support and nurturing environment that was, especially for younger children, I guess. I'm not so much sure about high school, but, it was supportive in a way that an integrated situation, as a minority, you couldn't get that sort of same support
You
network.
couldn't have those conversations
or nurturing,
and to integrate it, because you talked about the white world versus the black world, and you couldn't do that.
And that would have been an antagonistic conversation. If
I
you'd had
remember one of the first experiences I had at Patrick Henry. The announcement came on the loudspeaker for all of the National Honor Society students to report to this teacher's classroom for a meeting. Well, I got up and I went to the classroom. Well, when I arrived, I was the only black person in there. And they looked around and, who are you? And I said, well, the announcement said to report. Well, I said, I was in the National Honor Society at John M. Gandy. And they said, oh, no, you have to be tapped into this society here at Patrick Henry. And I said, well, the announcements didn't, make a differentiating statement. It said all that, and I was a member. So that's why I'm here.
And did they allow you to stay?
Yeah.
Well,
good. Then what happened is they had a program where they actually tapped us, the ones who came over from John M. Gandy. See, they didn't realize that we even had that same organization.
Right.
You see, the miscommunication, they didn't realize. So then my junior year, because this was my sophomore year when I entered Patrick Henry, my junior year, I am one who taps the new people.
Right.
Because I was a part of the organization, and they just said, okay. So once I became tapped, then the following year, I was able to tap other students. So it was just a matter of communication, and that's what I learned was so important in being successful. you had to have those open lines of communication. And one of the things I found, the students here at Randolph-Macon, they were more interested in what it was like being a minority. And they would approach me and ask questions because a lot of these students had never interacted with black students before. We were the first.
Right.
So they were very interested. So I did not have an environment where people didn't want to associate with you. What I found is they wanted to know. And a lot of the students that attended Randolph-Macon came from backgrounds, privileged backgrounds. So they weren't, how should I say, they weren't intimidated or afraid of minority students. They wanted to know more about us. And it was an economic thing more than anything. They came from those backgrounds where they had means to travel, to do whatever they wanted to do. So being today a minority, if you're in the same economic group, poor, middle income, upper middle income, that's what it comes down to, the economics. Because if you're trying to get what they're trying to get, there's competition there. So you do have that antagonistic environment. Whereas at Randolph-Macon, we weren't seen as competition. We were seen as, oh, how can I learn? You know, what is it like to be, you know, a minority? So that was good because I was very close with Ann Graves. She's in my class. She's out in La Jolla.
Oh,
She's a professor out at the university there. And she got her PhD. And I had, when I worked with Bank of America, I was one of the Award of Excellence winners. So they would send the winners off to a convention for a week. And so I got to go to out there. And I touched base with Ann, and she picked me up, and we drove around, and she showed me all the different things, you know, her world. And, you know, after all those years, we were able, it was like we never missed a beat. We just, I mean, it's been 20, 25 years since I'd really interacted or spoken to her. And when I called her to tell her I was going to go out to San Diego, oh, when? And she picked me up, and, you know, we just went along like we had never been apart.
That's what's wonderful about a school like Randolph-Macon, where the relationships are deep and lasting.
Exactly.
That's good.
Exactly. And we email each other now from time to time. But again, she and I used to, when we were students here, I was an English major, and she was a history major. And Dr. Scanlon used to give her fits. I took courses under him. He and I got along fine. But he used to give her fits, and we used to discuss, well, what am I doing wrong? She used to say, what am I? I said, I don't know, Ann, just be yourself. You know. But it was very good. That's the experience I had with the student life. Everyone wanted to know. And I was the only English major, Charlotte Beeman and I. Charlotte didn't graduate. She lost her mom. And she just couldn't
That's tough.
get it together.
It's hard.
Dr. Gray used to always ask me about her. How is Miss Beeman? And, I lost track of her. But she didn't graduate from Randolph-Macon.
Right.
And neither did Lynda. And they were in that first class.
Right.
But the second class, Yvonne and I, and Chris Lee, who I think is now a doctor. Chris went on to medical school.
I think that's right,
And so we were the three that graduated in 76. And I have a picture of the three of us.
Uh-huh.
We took pictures on graduation day. And I've lost contact with Chris. I think Vaughn told me. I called her Vaughn. Vaughn told me that I'm not sure where he's practicing, where he is.
I can
But
look it up
maybe
in my I can tell
I
you
could
today.
find that out with the Making Memories
Yes,
website.
I'll look it. I'll look it up in the directory. But I do believe he is a doctor. I think you're right. Well, so you were an English major, and you mentioned Dr. Gray. Can you talk about what classes were memorable for you, and which were most difficult or
Well,
most
that
interesting?
freshman year was really challenging for me because, coming from making straight A's in high school
Yeah.
and, juggling, the organization activities. I ran for student body president and all those things at high school, the Beta Club, the service organization
yes.
clubs, the National Honor Society, all of that. So you're kind of used to getting the good grades. Well, when I first class in Dr. Gray, he said, freshmen cannot write. Number one, you cannot write. And of course, the first paper that I wrote, I got a C plus on it. I was devastated. But I just couldn't understand why. I mean, so I had to just kind of take a second look, and I didn't really work very hard on grades here. I just didn't feel that was what I needed to do while I was here. I got average grades. I just didn't feel that was what my purpose was. My purpose was to learn about the people here and their backgrounds and how they became successful, how their parents became successful. And that's what I really focused on, the social part of people skills. And I think I did that well because once I began working, even though I was an English major, I thought about going into journalism.
Yes.
So I did work on the student paper, the Yellow Jacket. I did work on, I was a member of the Washington Literary Society. But those are the only things I really did as far as extracurricular, formal extracurricular activities. I just wanted to learn about the people.
Yeah.
And what made them tick. And then when I went out into the work world at Mutual of New York, I stayed there for 15 years. They asked me to relocate to Bethesda, Maryland, because at that time, after they merged all of the Virginia offices, then they merged Virginia with the Maryland offices. And they asked me to relocate to go and run Virginia and Maryland. At that time, my son was only 8 years old, and I was working long, hard hours. So I decided not to do that. So what I did is I stayed in the Richmond office and became a financial planner. And created my own base. So 15 years later, I did what I initially was asked to do when I joined Mutual of New York. And that was very rewarding. I really enjoyed that work. And while I was there, I had a network of black females. I reached out to attorneys, other insurance agents, lawyers, I said attorneys, the property and casualty insurance world, and banking. And we would have a monthly luncheon where we would meet and refer each other clients and business. So if someone needed legal advice, I would send them to the attorney that was in my network. And we did that for a few years. And that was very rewarding because it gave me an opportunity to really hone in on the black community because I had lost that. I had been in, a more assimilated world. So I wanted to give back to my base, my black community, and that was really good. We were all professional women trying to make it in the business world, in the corporate world,
in the white man's world.
Right. And it was good because I could see both sides of it. I saw how they were successful, what they did, and then I was able to bring that into my little network. And then Elaine came my divorce, so I just kind of lost focus in that, and I just regrouped and kind of got out of the work world for about a year or two to kind of regroup to see what it is I wanted to do, raise my son, and then I got my real estate license. And that's when I started doing real estate because I'm a person like this. I found out that you really can't depend on what people tell you all the time or the advice they give you. You have to learn it for yourself. So that's why I got my own insurance credentials. I got my real estate license and learned and worked in that field for a while. And then I said, what's left? Okay, banking. So that's when I decided to work part-time in banking, and I did real estate. So I did both to build my own resume and my own income, not depend on my ex-husband. And I was with the bank maybe a year, and they approached me about going into the management training program because they saw my work ethic and what I would do. I never forget, I took that job at the bank as the customer service rep on the phone. And my sister at that time, who was the finance director for the city of Richmond, she said, what, are you crazy? You're going to take a job on the phone? I said, I need to learn this business from the ground up, hands-on. That's how I was. And it's steady income. It's got benefits. With real estate, you have to do all of that yourself.
Yes.
So that's why I did that. And it wasn't long. I moved on up the chain at the bank, and I retired from Bank of America in November of 2010 after 15 years working there. So insurance, real estate, and banking. Then my son decided he wanted to go back to school, and he wanted to go to law school. So he got into the program where he would get his MBA and his JD.
All right.
So that's what he's doing. So that's when I decided to go back to work.
Yeah. So you could help him a little bit. Yeah.
With the city of Richmond. So, it was just timing. Yeah. Timing is everything. So that's what I do now. Yeah. So I plan to work another 3 years. And at 62, I will be officially retired.
Right. Be done.
My husband has a tax business. He retired. But then when I decided to go back to work, he decided to get this tax business because that's his background.
Yes.
And so that's what we do now. And that's why we're in the Richmond area where all of the family is. Yeah. His family isn't, but mine is.
Yeah. Well, you talked a lot about, even from high school and at Randolph-Macon and in the work world, about straddling two worlds. Networking with your Black Professional Women Network, which is a wonderful thing, but being in the white male world, and a similar thing at Randolph-Macon. Can you talk about what situations at Randolph-Macon you thought helped you with that, or open, were opportunities for that?
Well, even the professors, the professors were all male. We only had B.J. Seymour as a professor, and then we had a psychology professor, Hughes, I believe. I took a course under her. But at that time, those were the only female professors. So it's Carol like you had to understand how they think. So that you could get your point across and not come off as being very emotional. Everything
Mhm.
had to be fact-based.
Mhm.
And that's what I learned. Whenever you take a stand for anything, it's got to be fact-based. You can't um, rely on the emotional side. And females have a tendency to talk about how they feel
Mhm.
versus what are the facts here.
Mhm.
And I've always managed my life based on the facts.
Mhm.
That's just how I inherently do that.
Mhm.
So coming to Randolph-Macon and being in the male-dominated world, it just helped me define that is the way to go.
Mhm.
You've got to make your arguments or persuade people or be influential based on the facts.
Mhm.
This is what we're looking at.
Mhm.
And then the feelings and all of that come into play, but that's secondary. So being in this environment, it just helped me see it clearer and clearer. I really became less emotional to the point where when I joined Bank of America, I was working in a primarily female environment, and I had a lot of I don't want to say issues, but I had to relearn.
Mhm.
I had to be more touchy feely. I had to be more sensitive to feelings. And
Mhm.
that was a challenge for me
Mhm.
because that was not what I had dealt with
Right.
here at Randolph Macon, at Mutual of New York,
Mhm.
or in real estate for that
Mhm.
matter.
Mhm.
But at the bank, that's when I had to really find that balance. So I struggled with that
Mhm.
for years because the feedback, everybody, oh, she hurt my feelings.
No.
she, she just, you know, time. My thing was time. Don't waste my time.
Mhm.
Um, if you can't um, take the feedback,
Right.
that's on you. It's not on me.
Yeah.
This is how it is. You need to change. And I had to find a balance
Mhm.
because it wasn't all them.
Mhm.
And so in that respect, Randolph-Macon didn't help me. I had to find that way
Mhm.
on my own. And the people skills I learned, um, they had the foundation here
Mhm.
because it was all, fact-based, but you also had to network. You had to be able to understand why people did what they did.
Mhm.
And feelings do come into play.
Mhm.
So I can't really say that really was a great help for me
Mhm.
based on what I did here. I learned that after the fact.
Mhm.
I learned that after the fact. I'm trying to think of any a specific experience that I hate feeling weak,
Mhm.
and I think women have a tendency to be placed in that type of
Mhm.
environment. A lot of men tend to look. I don't think that's the case so much now, but back then, men still saw females. Oh, I have to tread softly. I can't really say what I need to say. Whereas, give it to me with both barrels. That's how I always operated.
Mhm.
But I think the professors in particular, they realized that they couldn't treat the female like they treated the males because it was in a all-male school. They had to choose their words
Hmm.
and or not so much choose the words, just don't communicate because initially Richard Haskell. He had that reputation of being very factual. The feelings didn't interact. But he and I got along famously because that's the way I was. Give me the facts. And we got along really well. And I got to see that kind of side of him because he felt comfortable with me.
Yeah.
So that was what I learned. You had to make people feel comfortable with you and not feel intimidated. Be open and, stand your ground, whatever it is, but be open to the feedback. So he was one of my best professors, although he had that reputation of
being rough.
of being kind of rough around the edges. But I really enjoyed his classes. Now, Dal Wooten, he was different. He didn't feel comfortable interacting with females. That's, I don't think he felt comfortable. I don't think he did. He and Vaughn had some face-offs. But I can't be specific, but I remember she no matter what she did, what her papers were, he would not give her, and she was very focused on the grades.
Yeah.
The grades. And he just would not give her the grades that she was looking for. She struggled with him. But he just wasn't comfortable with women. She wasn't the only one.
Yeah. Well, since there were such a few number of women on campus relative to the men at that time, did you, was that a really bonding experience for the women in those early classes?
Oh, absolutely. I think,
I guess, too,
aside from being the minority group, I think the women did tend to stick together because there were so many of the males there. But personally, I was never in the group. I always kind of not stayed to myself, but I wasn't interested in all that female. That was just me. I was on a mission. I'm going to learn what they know.
That's interesting.
So
yes.
I didn't really spend a lot of time listening to the female critics.
Right.
I didn't have time for that.
Did you ever consider leaving Randolph-Macon when you were here, or
Absolutely
not?
not.
So you were.
I never felt uncomfortable here. I knew I was going to be here, and I was going to be successful here. And I worked in the alumni office. Part of my funding came from work study.
Right.
And so I worked with Miss Annabelle Reynolds in the alumni office and Roddy Jones. And I kind of got to know some of the politics that was going on. Not that but listening.
Right.
Overhearing things. So I knew that the school was always on a quest for excellence. They always wanted to draw, a lot of good students, students that would go on to be successful and give back to the school.
Right.
That was the alumni office. That was what they focused on. And I understood the importance of that. And Godfrey Smith used to do a lot of work on behalf of the school. So it was really interesting when, after I left and got into the work world, he was one of the first people I met, and we had that instant connection.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So it just showed me, oh, this is why you do what you do.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm. My mother was very protective of us because she was divorced at a time when women didn't get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
She worked long, hard hours and she made sure that we had what we needed.
Mm-hmm.
But she was not an emotional person. She was very steadfast, and I think I learned a lot of that from her.
Mm-hmm.
She had her morals and her values, and you didn't deter
Mm-hmm.
from them. Hard work gets you what you want, and that's what I learned from her. So I saw myself as an example to my brother and my sister. This is what you have to do to kind of raise yourself up and do the best you can do. Even, she died in 2009. She had Alzheimer's. And she was a very independent, proud woman. And to see her go through that, where she, lost, grips on reality, I made sure that she stayed in her home as long as she could. Because, it gets to a point where you can't function. Someone has to be there. I paid the nurses around the clock to be there with her. So it was hard to see her come to that. But I know I did the best I could for her, and I think she knows that. But if it wasn't for her and what she taught me at a young age, you have to be independent. You cannot depend on anyone, especially a man. That was her thing. You can't depend on men to take care of you.
Right.
And that's why I think that made me focus on what personally I focused on, why I was here.
Yeah.
Make sure that I can take care of myself.
Yeah.
I don't need to have anyone else to do that for me. And that's how I've lived my life.
Yeah. Well, as you were a trailblazer at Patrick Henry in that integration, and then you came here, did you have any other friends at Patrick Henry who had a similar experience, who also went to a predominantly white college? Were there any friends who were going through the same thing you were at that time?
That's an interesting question because I never... I do know that the black community as a whole was very proud of the fact that I was able to attend this school, the first minority from Ashland. And the community really looked upon my mother because she was able, despite the adversity she faced, she was able to, she never encouraged me to go to college because she didn't want me to be disappointed, I think. I remember when I got the letter that I had gotten acceptance. I got accepted at both of the other schools. My guidance counselor wanted me to go to Mary Washington because at that time it was an all-girls school. And she wanted me to go there because she thought I would get the polish. Because I was from a rural, small town. And I told her I didn't need that. I would pick that up along the way, which I think I did.
Yeah.
But that's what my guidance counselor, who was a black female, who came
was looking out
over
for
from John M. Gandhi.
So she was looking out for you. Yeah.
She was.
Yes.
She was. But the point is, when I think of the other black students that I went to Patrick Henry with, a lot of them went to white schools. Jackie Lawrence. I'm just trying to think of who. But more so, I was expected to do what I did because of what I did at Patrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not going to let myself down
Mm-hmm.
or anyone else down
Mm-hmm.
in the community, because we are a tight-knit
Mm-hmm.
community, the black folk in
Mm-hmm.
Ashland. Very tight-knit community. So I felt that, it was expected of me. So when I got the acceptance letter, my mother, she didn't say, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." None of that. She just kind of cried and went into the house. We were at the mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
But I could tell from the look on her face, she was so proud.
Mm-hmm.
But she couldn't say it
Mm-hmm.
because she had been through so much
Mm-hmm.
personally on her own.
Mm-hmm.
She only went to the 8th grade
Mm-hmm.
because she was not allowed the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And she always said, if you have the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
you can do it. You can make something of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this was my opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my sister went on to go to an all-women's college. She went to Chatham
Oh, uh-huh.
in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
My brother went to Virginia Union,
Mm-hmm.
a private black school,
Mm-hmm.
and he works for Genworth.
Mm-hmm.
We all
Mm-hmm.
were successful
Mhm.
because we had the opportunity to get
Mm-hmm.
the education.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. It's unfortunate that a lot of minorities, even today, they don't get the opportunity to go to school. Things have changed. I came along at a time where, government funding, grants were plentiful.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that now.
Mm-hmm.
You really, if you don't have the parents that can afford to send you to school, that's the
And
only
it's gotten
thing.
so
It's gotten
expensive that
so-
even
it's-
that's
I'm
becoming rare.
just blessed that I came along when I did,
Mm-hmm.
and I had that opportunity. So, as far as what Randolph-Macon gave me, they gave me that opportunity to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
What Vaughn does with the school system, and working with the city of Richmond, I see so much. And I'm more involved now in helping the black community in the city of Richmond because of what I do. I head up a program that helps our senior citizens that can't afford to have utilities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are necessities of life.
Mm-hmm.
So my people, we work hard, we advocate to help the seniors to stay in their homes and be able to live on their own rather than being a burden on society.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my time now to kind of give back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I see my role now.
Mm-hmm. That's good. When you were here, and since your family was in Ashland, did you still do things in Ashland with the black community that you'd grown up in, or did you really throw yourself completely into the Randolph-Macon community? I mean, you mentioned driving your mother, but other than your immediate family, I mean, as far as going to church or other social events, did you do things in Ashland with friends there, or did you just really
No,
focus at
because
college?
most of my friends had the group that I was associated with in high school. They all went off to school.
Dispersed, right?
Mm-hmm. So my friends were not here.
Yeah.
I had to make new friends.
And
So I basically stayed on campus.
Yeah.
And I would go and visit my friends at their schools, on the weekend. Sometimes Vaughn and I would go
Mm-hmm.
to visit. We would go to Virginia State because we wanted to see the other schools and
Right.
what they were doing. And so I did not do a lot in Ashland.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I had my wedding reception at Frankie Brown
Oh.
Center
Uh-huh.
in 1978.
So it was pretty new, I guess.
It was new, and
yeah.
I drove up. I said, they're replacing it. It's the
Yes.
Block Student Center now.
Yeah.
But that was a nice building. It was where our student
Mhm,
center was then. They had the little cafe there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I got along with the people who worked in there,
Mm-hmm.
all of the maintenance people. These were people that I grew up with. They worked here.
And were they? And you were.
Mr. Talaferro,
Uh-huh.
and of course he's passed on.
Yeah.
Mr. James,
Mm-hmm.
what was his last name?
Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But I would spend time. I would go and visit them after hours, after classes, and talk with them, and maintain that connection. Mm-hmm.
So you knew them from the community because you've grown up here.
Right.
So you had an easy relationship
Right.
with people who were working at on
Yeah,
campus.
I never wanted to lose that.
Yeah.
Because these were people I knew. We went to church together.
Right.
And all of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So being in Ashland, I had to make sure that I did good,
Mm-hmm.
even though I was here, because everybody knew who
Yeah.
I was. They knew my background. They knew my parents. They
Yes.
knew my grandparents.
Yes.
My grandmother didn't want me to come here because the kids, prior to the coeducational
Mm-hmm.
piece, the guys would do pranks
Mm-hmm.
on the local people and
Oh.
do stuff, and a lot of them were spoiled rich kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they came here, and this was this little boring town, and they had to make excitement. They would do stuff with the trains and all
Yeah.
this. And my grandmother said, "Oh no, you're not going there. They're gonna hurt you. They're gonna harm you." She was afraid for me.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, "No, it's all about how I carry myself."
Yeah.
Because her thing was, "Oh, they may try to rape you."
Oh.
That's what she said.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "No, it's all about how I carry
Mhm.
myself."
Mhm.
Never had any issues
Yeah.
like that. Never had anyone say anything out of the way
Yeah.
that was, unladylike or
Yeah.
Never had any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, "Rest assured, it's going to be based on how I carry myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to have that issue." And I never did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But the reputation that the boys in the campus had
Mm-hmm.
years ago
Mm-hmm.
wasn't always the best
Right.
as far as the community was concerned.
Right. It's the town. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have that issue. It was funny. I don't know if what I've shared with you has been helpful, but I will say this. Randolph-Macon gave me the opportunity to find out who I am
Mm-hmm.
and what's important
Mm-hmm.
in life.
Mm-hmm.
The diversity piece was huge for me because I had that opportunity to meet people from all walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
not just the rich kids, the one that were born with the silver spoon in their mouths,
Mhm.
everybody, because Randolph-Macon represents a huge diversity of backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, different nationalities. And to me, I will always be thankful for that because
Mhm.
it prepared me to go out into the world
Mm-hmm.
and interact with, again, people from all corners of the world.
Mhm.
I've traveled extensively.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is from Massachusetts. He is from an upper middle income background.
Mm-hmm.
His father was a tax attorney.
Mm-hmm.
He started a company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was active. She was a volunteer with the opera, the local opera company.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to move in all those circles.
Mm-hmm.
And it all started because of the people I met, and interacted to
Mm-hmm.
heal.
Mm-hmm.
So I never felt out of place. I was always at home in any environment that I found myself. For our honeymoon, we went to Rome. I always wanted to go to Rome. We flew to Rome, and then we took a cruise, and we went as far east as Istanbul.
Oh.
And so, I've had the opportunities to do so many different things because of the education.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a wonderful testimony, and it's a really wonderful testimony to Randolph-Macon, but also to you and your
Little small
who you
town
are as a
Ashland
person.
girl
Yeah.
that never let the color of her skin hold her back. I never did. Of course, my family circumstances have been a little different. My grandfather was white. My grandmother was half white. And that was kind of like a stigma in the community because none of the black people ever accepted our family. But all of the children of my grandfather married black women and black men, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to this thing about if you got a quarter of black blood, you're black.
Mm-hmm.
So because they looked white, but they never were accepted because people knew who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And that stigma, I think, was a driving force in me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't matter. What matters is who you are as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
What your beliefs are, what your values are. That's what really matters. That's what determines who you are and the kind of person you are, what your contributions are.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today your memories of growing up in Ashland and especially at Randolph-Macon and your life experience.
Mm-hmm. I am very thankful for it, and I was more than happy to come here today to share. If that means anything or it helps the school, I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much. Gladys, I was wondering if you could tell us about, you mentioned your sophomore year of high school was when Gandy closed or was no longer all-black school and you went to Patrick Henry, but can you talk about the integration in the Ashland Public Schools?
Well, actually, we refer to it as the forced integration period because prior to that, you had the freedom of choice where you could choose to go to the white school if you wanted to, but it was mandated that John M. Gandy actually became the elementary school. Prior to that, it was grades 1 through 12. So the entire black population on the western part of Hanover County attended John M. Gandy. But in September of 1969, that is when we had to go to Patrick Henry, and that would have been the beginning of my sophomore year. And it was pretty resistant because all of the black kids stayed together and all the white kids stayed together, and there was no real interaction to the point where I think it was Lane High School in Charlottesville had wanted to sing the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, and the principal had forbidden them to do that, and there was some sort of protest. So the principal of Patrick Henry wanted to head off any type of protests at Patrick Henry, so there were some black leaders that wanted to put on a program in honor of Black History Month, which was February. And they wanted to sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, which was like, if I recall, a couple of weeks later. And Albert Turner, I think his name was Albert, the principal at that time, didn't want us to perform the song because he thought that would lead to some protests. And so the students decided, well, if we can't sing our national black anthem, we're going to protest, and that's exactly what happened. And there was a sit-in, and the students refused to go to class, and it was an all-day affair. Students refused to go to class, and so at the time, Dennis Farley and I were running for student body president. And so Albert Turner called us into his office and asked us to ward off the commotion and talk to the black leaders and tell them to go back to class. And I refused to because I recognized it was their right to protest. If they wanted to sing the national anthem, black national anthem, they should be allowed to do it. And so consequently, several black students were expelled. They had a line of state troopers along 54, and they made the students board school buses, and they took them all down to Hanover Courthouse and arrested them. And I do believe to this day those students still have records of arrest for that. I was talking to someone, and I didn't realize that they were arrested. And actually, there is a record that followed them because of this. I don't know if that's really true, but someone told me that in a recent conversation that they still have that record. But there were like 3 or 4 busloads of black kids that were taken. And then consequently, the parents went down and got the children out of the lockup. And it was quite an ordeal. But I knew I better not get arrested, so because I knew my mother couldn't afford to post bail. Yeah. But again, those were trying times. And what's interesting is I recently attended the 40th reunion, and I looked around in the room, and we had black and white people sitting together, which is not something you saw during the high school days. So it was just a testimony to change. Yes. We've come a long way. Yeah. And that was one of the things that was most noticeable at our 40th reunion. We had about 50 to 60 people show up. My cousin came as far away from Syracuse. She's a professor at Syracuse University, and she was able to come. So it was really nice to see everybody, and I have a video which I'm planning to send her where they took pictures of everybody, different little shots of people interacting and talking. Yeah. So it was really nice. Long time. Good. Change.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And the town of Ashland has had a long, deep-rooted racial prejudice, traditions, very reluctant to change, to incorporate the black and whites relationship. In fact, before I came to Randolph-Macon, Duncan Memorial was the local church here on campus, was the site where they had meetings of whites and black students from the high school. And I forget what they called it, but I attended a couple of them. But it was rooted in trying to bring black and white people together. And this was orchestrated by the students. Some of the Randolph-Macon black students at the time which would have been the male students, and some of the local high school students, black and white, would meet. And I forget what they called it, but it was a circle where they tried to promote positive relations between the races. But Ashland has long been deeply rooted in traditions of, the black people stay with the blacks and the white people stay with the whites. And that has always been in the community. That's another reason why I guess I decided to go to Randolph-Macon. Because of that group that was meeting, I thought it was a positive step in the right direction, because it was trying to make changes within the community itself for positive race relations.
Well, once the college integrated it in the late 60s and then the early 70s, by the time you came along, where it was a more core number of black students, did you feel like those race relations in Ashland changed?
No.
No.
Even today, Ashland is still the way it is. I have not spent a lot of time here other than with my immediate family over the years, but I have heard conversations that the older established white population in the town is very much unchanged. It's the younger people that are moving into the area that's forging the change. The older established people are still the same. And I will tell you, my mother worked for the McGoverns, which is right here on College Avenue. They have a son, Malcolm, who's now, I think, at UVA. But when he was young, and this was probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I lose track of time. But my mother was like his governess. She would take care of him. And his grandmother, who lived down, a couple of doors down, would refuse to allow my mother to use the bathroom in her home. And so my mother stopped going to her house. She would keep Malcolm only in the McGovern's home because of that. But that's an example. And this was not that long ago. And she shared that with me when she was in the nursing home, my mother, that was why she stopped going there, that it was essentially unchanged. But that's just a personal example. And it doesn't speak to everything, but I think it speaks volumes. But there is still a lot of that among the older citizens.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's